It's been nearly 2 decades since Madeleine McCann disappeared during a family holiday in Portugal. And for a long time, it felt like the case had completely gone cold. But now there is some movement again. Over the past year, German authorities have carried out new searches, followed fresh leads, and continued to focus on a man they believe is responsible. Christian Brückner, a convicted criminal who was living near Praia da Luz at the time Madeleine vanished. So far, no charges have been filed and no major breakthrough announced, but the fact that investigation is still active and there are new searches has pulled the case back into the spotlight, and a lot of people are asking why now and is this actually going anywhere? So in this video, I want to break down where the investigation stands today, who the German suspect really is, and what's been uncovered recently that's keeping this case alive. And for those who don't remember or were maybe too young to follow the case when it first happened, I'll also go over what we know about that night in 2007 and touch on some of the most talked about theories that have followed this case for years. If you're new here, I am Cora and this is Crimes Across Borders. I cover true crime cases from across Europe and beyond. So if you want to keep up with this case and others like it, make sure to subscribe. Let's go back to the night Madeleine disappeared. It was May 3rd, 2007. Madeleine McCann was 3 years old, almost 4. She was on holiday in Praia da Luz, small coastal town in southern Portugal. She was with her parents, Jerry and Kate, and also her 2 younger siblings, twins who were about 2 years old at the time. The family was staying in a ground floor apartment in a resort complex. That evening, and I think other evenings as well, the parents went to dinner at a nearby tapas bar with a group of friends. They weren't far. It was about 50 meters in a straight line, but to actually get to the apartment, they had to walk around the pool and some gates. So it was probably a little bit more than just 50 meters. The parents took turns checking on the kids throughout the evening. So it was either Jerry or Kate going back to make sure the kids are still asleep. At around 10 p.m., Kate McCann went back to the apartment to check in, and that's when she found Madeleine was gone. There was no sign of forced entry. The twins were still asleep in their cots, but the window in the bedroom was open and Madeleine's bed was empty. From there, things moved fast, but also kind of slowly. The police were called, a local search began, and then by morning, the media had picked it up as well. But despite the early attention, a lot of people felt the initial investigation was disorganized and quite chaotic. The room was not properly secured. There were delays in blocking the roads. There were language barriers, miscommunications, and delays that would haunt the case for years to come. And in the middle of all that confusion, there was no trace of little Madeleine. Now, early on in the investigation, the focus shifted, and not in a way a lot of people expected, at least not at first. About 3 months in, Portuguese police officially named Jerry and Kate McCann as erguidos, which basically means formal suspects under Portuguese law. It didn't mean they were actually charged, just that they were being investigated more closely. So what actually led to that? So I think it was a lot of inconsistencies in the timeline, the way McCann's reported it. There was a lot of confusion about which doors were used to check in on the kids, which doors were unlocked, and the state of the window blinds. Was it open? Was it closed? Was it halfway closed? The parents reported it one way, and then during another interview, they said things differently. So that was already extremely suspicious for the investigators. Then a lot of people focused on the parents' behavior and body language during the interviews. And then, of course, we also had the results of the cadaver dogs. The reports claimed the dogs alerted to the scent of blood and dead body, specifically in the apartment, behind the sofa near the window, a cupboard inside the flat, and later in a car that McCann's had rented after Madeleine already disappeared. So as you can imagine, that was quite major revelation. It triggered a forensic investigation. One of the DNA samples from the car showed a partial match to Madeleine. 15 out of 19 components from her profile were present, but wasn't a slam dunk. The sample was tiny, degraded, and mixed with DNA from at least 3 other people. So in the end, the experts said the result wasn't strong enough to prove anything. It was too complex and ultimately too unreliable. Still, the media ran with it. The case exploded across Europe and kind of divided the world. In the UK, the McCanns still had a lot of public support, but in Portugal and later on online, more and more people began to question their version of events. Some believed the McCanns had accidentally caused Madeleine's death and just tried to cover it up. Others speculated about sedatives being used, to help the kids sleep. And of course, then the internet being internet, there were even more extreme conspiracy theories, stuff like secret societies, ritual sacrifice, Madeleine being sold or rented by her parents, all of this without the end. And at the same time, the McCanns had strong backing from public figures, companies, celebrities even. They received massive donations, and many people believed they were simply being used as scapegoats for a failed investigation with no clear leads. So whatever your opinion is, I think it's important to add here to remember that they were never charged with any crime. And both the UK and Portuguese authorities eventually cleared them. Although technically it happened when the investigation was closed in 2008 by the Portuguese police. So still, but of course, once that seed of suspicion was planted, it never really left the public conversation. And I'll be honest, I think a part of what made it worse was how the McCanns handled the media, which is interesting because they had so much support. They had public speakers and all of this, but they still weren't coming across very believable. They were quite calm, composed. I think they were still going for like morning runs and playing tennis while the case was unfolding. And, a lot of people, it just didn't sit right. But grief looks different for everyone. I think we shouldn't judge unless we were in the same position. Not everyone breaks down in public, and the pressure they were under was just unimaginable. Now let's go back to some other theories. There's a theory about a woman who lived nearby and may have accidentally hit Madeleine with a car. That story been around for years, but it's never been backed up with actual evidence. I don't know why people still talk about it. The police excluded the idea of Madeleine leaving the apartment by herself fairly early on, but yeah, that still floats around. Then one of the most talked about early leads in the case came from Jane Tanner, a friend of the McCanns. She was with them in the tapas bar. She told police she seen a man carrying a child wrapped in a blanket near the apartment around 9:15 in the evening the night Madeleine disappeared. And for years, that sighting was treated as a possible abduction in progress. People generally thought that might have been the moment Madeleine was taken. But get this, it wasn't until 6 years later, during the Scotland Yard review in 2013, that a man came forward after seeing the new Crime Watch appeal. He actually recognized himself. And it turns out he was just a dad picking up his daughter from the resort's night crash. The clothing matched, the timing matched. It was totally innocent. So, a major lead just went out of the window. How was that not figured out in the early days? You would think the police would have spoken to every guest staying there at the time. Jane Tanner gave that statement like straight away. So that wasn't information that was added later on. I just don't get it. But on the flip side, it shows how even years later, white media coverage can still help clear things up. Sometimes it just takes the right person seeing the right thing at the right time. Then we also had plenty of sightings. People have claimed to see Madeleine all over the world, in Spain, Morocco, Malta, India, Australia. Most of these turned out to be false alarms, just, completely unrelated children. But many of them were never really fully explained. And the theory that Madeleine was abducted by a stranger, either someone who'd been watching the apartment for days or someone who acted on an impulse, was just as strong as the theory that parents were guilty. The investigators confirmed that a man had been seen lurking around the resort in the days leading up to her disappearance, possibly casing the area. And actually, when I started reading more about everything happening around the apartment, I was shocked. There were reports of multiple break-ins, known offenders staying in nearby rentals, sightings of people acting weird and out of place, like literally lurking around balconies and staircases. And then, of course, there's the internet, so Reddit threads, YouTube deep dives, and now TikTok videos. People have been dissecting this case for years. Some of them pull out genuinely interesting leads, and others, they just fueling chaos. And frankly, it's really hard to separate what's even worth paying attention to anymore. The case has been around for so long that some of these theories have taken a life of their own, even when they've already been disproven. But then some other people keep reposting it without checking their sources, and the cycle just keeps going. A perfect example of that is the case of Julia Faustina, the Polish woman who went viral not long ago, claiming she might actually be Madeleine McCann. She said she had no clear memories of her early childhood and believed she looked like Madeleine. Her story caught fire online. People were sharing side-by-side photos, analyzing facial features, even comparing her to the old police sketches, comparing her photos to her parents' photos, to the siblings of Madeleine, all of that. And eventually she did a DNA test, but not one that was compared to the McCanns directly. It was just a general ancestry test, and it showed that she was primarily of Polish origin. So that should have put the story to rest. But then things flared up again when she resurfaced claiming new DNA test had been done, and this time allegedly compared to the crime scene evidence. And then she claimed there was something like 70% match with Jerry McCann. Again, it was just her saying that. No credible proof, no official confirmation, no the DNA test results, nothing like this. And if it wasn't strange enough, the most recent update is that she was actually arrested at the UK airport for allegedly stalking the McCann family. And to be honest, I was a bit surprised they didn't just take a proper DNA test with the family and just clear things up once and for all. I guess there are legal or personal reasons for why that never happened. But yeah. So what do you think about all of this? Are you Team Julia? If you were, or maybe still are, I would love to know why. What convinced you? What made her story feel believable to you at the time? Let me know in the comments. I'm always open to hearing different takes. And now let's talk about the suspect who's been at the center of the investigation for the last few years, Christian Brückner. So back in 2020, German prosecutors went public with something huge. They said they were convinced this man was responsible for Madeleine McCann's disappearance. And that's a strong word to use, especially without formal charges, and it definitely got people's attention. So who is he? Brückner is a German national with a long, messy criminal record: burglary, drug trafficking, and several sexual offenses. He's currently serving a 7-year sentence in Germany for raping a 72-year-old woman back in 2005. And the attack, it happened in the same region of Portugal where the McCanns were staying. So now, why is he even on the police radar in relation to the McCann's case? Back in 2007, Brückner was living in Algarve. He had access to a camper van, and a phone records place him in the Praia da Luz area on the night Madeleine vanished. He even received a phone call that pinged off a tower near the apartment around the same time. So yeah, it all lines up, but so far it's still all circumstantial. And even though it's been over 4 years since that big announcement from the German prosecutors, he still hasn't been officially charged in connection with the case. But that doesn't mean nothing is happening. The investigators have searched multiple properties linked to him over the past few years, including a remote reservoir in Portugal called the Ardedam. That spot had actually come up more than once. They've also searched one of Brückner's storage units and an old garden allotment in Germany, where they found a hard drive buried under a dead dog. Yeah, a dead dog. And on that drive, there were photos taken in Portugal, and the investigators haven't said exactly what was on it, but they've hinted it's one of the reasons they believe Madeleine is no longer alive. And if that hard drive wasn't enough, they also found over 70 kids' costumes, toddler toys, what looked like child abduction stories, possibly written by Brückner himself, and even a bottle of ether, which, can be used to knock someone out. Even if he had nothing to do with Madeleine, that is seriously messed up. I mean, he's obviously not a nice person. It's not someone we want walking around as they want. So in June of this year, the investigators went back to Portugal again, this time to land near Atalaya, just over a mile from the McCann's apartment. And it's an area linked to property Brückner was using back in 2007. That search lasted 4 full days, and it wasn't just for a show. They used ground-penetrating radar, drones, diggers, firefighters were pumping water out of old wells. They really went all in. They covered 21 separate plots, including scrubland and abandoned buildings. They were busy. And at this time, they reportedly found more fabric, more bones, probably animal bones again, and something new. They found 2 firearms. One was a 6.35 millimeters pistol, and the other some kind of older weapon. Couldn't find much solid info about it, but either way, both guns and other items were sent for forensic testing in Lisbon and in Germany. And unfortunately, nothing so far has been confirmed. We don't know if any of it connects directly to Madeleine, but the fact that they're still actively searching nearly 2 decades later, to me, that speaks volumes. Now, not everything is moving forward. In late 2024, Brückner was actually acquitted of some other sexual assault charges tied to incidents in Portugal. The court said the evidence just wasn't strong enough and some of the witnesses weren't reliable. And prosecutors are appealing, but, it might be a while before we hear anything else. And meanwhile, Brückner keeps denying everything. His lawyers claim the police are dragging this out without any solid proof. Honestly, the fact that the investigators are still out there draining wells, digging up remote farmland nearly 20 years later, that doesn't sound like they don't have anything. That means they are motivated. It makes sense for them. And if they're doing all of this just months before his release, it really does feel like a race against time. But if they are going to charge him with anything, it kind of has to be now. He's supposed to get out this September. And here's actually another little twist. About 2 years ago, a former German police officer actually paid off some of his court fines, and now she's asking for her money back, saying she had no idea about his criminal history at the time. And if she wins that refund, it could actually keep Brückner locked up until January 2026. It's a strange situation, but it might actually give the investigators a few more months to build a case against Brückner. And I really hope they will manage to do this. And I just hope we get the truth for Madeleine, for her family, for everyone who worked on that case for nearly 20 years. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you believe Brückner is really involved, or are we looking again at another dead end? And if there are any other missing person cases you want me to cover next, drop them below. I'm always keeping an eye out for new developments and lesser known stories that also deserve more attention. And if you found this video informative or it gave you something to think about, please give it a like, subscribe, and share it with someone who's been following this case too. It really helps the channel grow. Thanks for watching Crimes Across Borders. I'm Cora, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.